Yo, what's up, guys? It's Gorm70 here, coming back with another mini series. I'm gonna be doing the record predictions for each NFL team for this upcoming season. Ignore my phone notifications because that's what I'm doing this on my phone, so ignore them. I'm gonna be starting off here with the Las Vegas Raiders, who had the #1 overall pick in this past draft, who took Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana, Heisman and national championship quarterback. Now, with the Las Vegas Raiders, there's a couple of unknowns. Like, how are they going to be this year? I'm fairly certain they're going to be under 500 once again, but I do believe they're going to be better than last year. And I also think they're going to pull off one or two upsets this year against teams that you wouldn't necessarily think they would pull an upset against. And I guess we're just going to find out once we get to that game. I do believe they're going to be still under 500, like I said. Don't think they're going to be a playoff team. But I do believe they're going to be a little more competitive than they were last year. And I will also write all these picks down, so when I do other teams and they come across games that I've already done for the team they're facing, I'm going to keep the same results. Like, for example, I'm doing the Raiders right now. And let's say, for example, I picked the Raiders to beat the Saints in Week 3. I'm not saying I'm going to. We haven't gotten there yet. But for example, and then I do the Saints once we get to Week 3. I'm just going to give them a loss from Week 3 because I want to keep it the same as I did from one team to the next. So I will write these down to keep these keep this the same. All right, so let's get into this record. Week 1, they got the Miami Dolphins in Las Vegas. The Miami Dolphins are in the same boat as the Las Vegas Raiders. They're both in rebuilding mode. And they both have a brand new head coach. So both teams will have their head coaches making their debuts with each team. Same thing with the quarterbacks. Fernando Mendoza versus Malik Willis, also making their season and NFL debuts. Well, NFL debut for Fernando, a season debut for Malik Willis with his new team. A lot of people think the Dolphins are going to win this game, just because on paper they do have the slightly better team, in my opinion. However, with all the hype coming around Fernando Mendoza, I know that there's reports saying that Kirk Cousins might get the starting job at first, but you don't draft a quarterback #1 overall in the NFL draft and you don't start him. And if they don't start Fernando Mendoza, then they're just stupid. But I'm going to give it to Fernando Mendoza. I think he's going to get his first career win in Week 1 against the Dolphins. I think it's going to be a close game, but I do see the Raiders pulling it out. In Week 2, the Raiders got their first divisional game, where they go to Los Angeles to face the Chargers. The Chargers are obviously a playoff team this year. They're just obviously just way ahead of the Raiders. Yeah, I'm gonna give the Chargers the win here. The Raiders are gonna get their loss here. In Week 3, they're going to the Saints to play New Orleans. New Orleans, they're gonna be, in my opinion, a sneaky competitive team again. Also this year, I also think they have a chance to win the NFC South, just like every other NFC South team. Every year will have a chance to win, just because that division is just always wide open. But I am going to give it to the Saints here. I'm going to give another loss to the Las Vegas Raiders, just because I think the Saints just are a step above the Raiders, and yeah, I think they'll have the better offense in this one. Defense, I'm going to give the Saints a little bit too, but yeah, I'm going to give it to the Saints. Week 4, they go back home to face another division opponent, the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs had a very disappointing year last year. Patrick Mahomes got hurt. But the Chiefs, they're getting Patrick Mahomes back, and they got Kenneth Walker to stabilize that run game. And I'm going to give it to the Chiefs here. I don't see the Raiders beating the Chiefs. I just don't. Honestly, I think the Chiefs are going to sweep them. I could see the Raiders competing with the Chiefs in both games because one, it is a divisional game. They play them twice a year. They know them, and especially in Arrowhead, because for whatever reason, the Raiders love to just compete in Arrowhead, for no reason. But yeah, I don't see the Chiefs losing to the Raiders. In Week 5, the Raiders then go to New England to face the Patriots. And everybody remembers, last year in Week 1, the Raiders did go into New England and beat the New England Patriots. And that Raiders team last year was awful. And I do believe this Raiders team is better this year than it was last year. So guess what? Here's one of the games where I feel like the Raiders can pull off an upset, and I'm going to give it to the Raiders again. I don't know. I just feel like that the Raiders have the Patriots number here recently. I know it's only one game from last year, but this is one of the games I feel like they'll pull off an upset against. In Week 6, they come back home and play the Buffalo Bills. This one's going to be another tough one for the Raiders. Josh Allen and that Bills offense is always a tough one to play, just how tough it is to play against Josh Allen, and that defense is solid over there in Buffalo. I'm going to give it to Buffalo. I just don't see the Raiders beating the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, I like that. In Week 7, the Raiders then also stay home against the other Los Angeles team, against the Rams. This one's not even going to be close. I feel like this is going to be a blowout. I feel like the Rams are going to blow them out. This team is stacked. They just traded for Myles Garrett, and that offense is going to be tough for the Raiders defense. And that Rams defense is, I feel like, going to wreak havoc on Fernando Mendoza, especially Myles Garrett. I pray Fernando Mendoza's line take steroids before that game, because they're going to need it to protect Fernando Mendoza, even with Tyler Lindenbaum. Alright, moving on to Week 8, the Jets and the Raiders. These two teams are also very similar. First overall pick and second overall pick. Although I believe the Jets had the best NFL draft in this past draft. In the first round, they drafted 3 starters. 1 on defense, 2 on offense. Their quarterback is kind of up in the air because we don't know what's going on with Geno Smith, but it should be Geno Smith. But I'm actually going to give it to the Raiders here. I think they're going to beat the Jets. A lot of people think the Jets will win, but I'm going to give it to the Jets. To the Raiders. Just because I think they got the better quarterback. I know that Fernando Mendoza is unproven, but I believe that Fernando's going to have a way better career than Geno Smith. And yeah, I'm going to give it to the Raiders. Y'all can disagree with me, and you guys let me know in the comments. Week 9, I have the San Francisco 49ers beating the Raiders. I think the 49ers are going to take a step up from last year. They're going to be healthy again, and that team is tough to face when they're healthy. They're a tough team to play last year, and they were not healthy, for the exception of that divisional game, because they just got their ass kicked by the Eagles. But either way, they were injured, especially on the defensive side, and they still were a tough team to play. And I think now they're healthy, they're just going to be a way tougher team to play. And who knows, if Mike Evans can stay healthy, that's another 1,000-yard receiver for Brock Purdy. It's hard for me to see the Raiders keeping up with San Francisco in the Bay. Week 10, the Raiders come home to play the Super Bowl champs and the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, I'm going to give this to Seattle. I just think that defense is going to be too strong for, even though they did have a couple people leave the Seattle Seahawks, that defense usually is pretty good every year. And I just think that offense is going to be too much for the Raiders' defense. I just think overall the Seahawks are going to be too much for the Raiders. Week 11, the Raiders then play the Broncos for the first time of the year in Mile High. Just like with, a couple of the offenses they're facing, it's going to be close because it's a divisional game. No matter how bad one team is or how good the other team is, most of the time divisional games are close because they play them twice a year. They know these teams a lot better than the other teams. But I am going to give it to the Broncos here. I do believe the Broncos will win this game in Mile High. Going to Week 12. The Raiders go to Cleveland to play the Browns. The Browns are a mess. Traded Myles Garrett to the Rams. Although they did get Jerry Verse. Don't get me wrong, that's a good pick. He's a good player, young player. But he's no Myles Garrett. I'm actually going to give it to the Raiders here. A lot of questions are going to be around who's going to be the Browns quarterback. How are they going to play? Is it going to be Deshaun? Can Deshaun Watson play like he did years ago with the Texans? Or is it going to be Shedeur? Can he take a step up? Or is it going to be Dillon Gabriel? Who's going to be the Browns quarterback? A lot of questions. They have a decent receiving core over there. Offensive line's kind of shaky. Defense, I don't know what we're going to see from the Browns defense without Myles Garrett. But we know we're going to get from the Raiders, who they have on their team. So I'm going to give it to the Raiders here. Going to Week 14, the Raiders play the second game against the Chargers at home. You remember how I said that I think the Raiders will take one or two upsets? Here's the second upset. I'm picking the Raiders at home to split against the Chargers. These two teams usually play good games. And the Raiders usually play the Chargers better at home than they do on the road. So I'm giving it to the Raiders here. Week 15, playing the Broncos again. Yeah, I'm going to give it to the Broncos. I think they're going to sweep the Raiders. I just don't see them taking back-to-back games against the Chargers and Broncos. I feel like they're going to take one of the two against those teams in Week 14 and 15, but I feel like they'll have a better chance to beat the Chargers than they do with the Broncos. It's going to be tough matchups either way. Week 16 against the Titans. You got two former first overall picks going off against each other in this game for Fernando Mendoza and Cam Ward. Actually, these two teams are also very similar in a way. I'm actually going to give it to the Raiders here. I think that since they're at home, they're going to get a slight edge against the Titans. If it was in Tennessee, I'd probably give it to the Titans, but I am going to give it to the Raiders. Week 17, the Raiders play the Cardinals, and the Cardinals were the other top 3 team in the draft, choosing Jeremiah Love, running back out of Notre Dame, to pair with Carson Beck or Tyler Huntley, if they can get that contract situation settled. Whoever the quarterback is at this time, it could very well be Carson Beck. This Cardinals team, another similar boat as the Raiders, rebuilding, can go either way. I'm going to give it to the Raiders. I think that they have the slightly better team here. But yeah, I'm going to give it to the Raiders here. But I would not be surprised if the Cardinals win. I feel like this game would just be a dogfight, and either team could win. Week 18, the final game against the Chiefs in Arrowhead. Depending on this, let me see. Now this game is going to be kind of interesting. I know I said the Chiefs are going to sweep the Raiders, but who knows what's going to happen in this game? If the Chiefs need a win, obviously they're going to play their starters. But if the Chiefs don't really need this game to improve their seeding, they could very well sit their starters in this one. And the Raiders, since they're 7-9, they're probably not going to be making the playoffs. They'll probably play their starters still. This one's a toss-up just because we don't know what the Chiefs are going to be like at the end of the season. I am going to be a tentative giving it to the Chiefs. But if the Chiefs end up sitting their starters at the end of the year because they don't need this game, really, then I would see the Raiders. I could see the Raiders beating the Chiefs if it's against the Chiefs' backups. But if, obviously, the Chiefs are playing, I don't see the Raiders beating the Chiefs starters at all. But I am going to give it to the Chiefs. So that gives you a record of 7-10. Not 500, not above. Probably not making the playoffs with a 7-10 record unless the entire AFC sucks, which I don't see that happening. But I do believe this is a reasonable record. I do believe that the Raiders will be a lot more competitive this year than they were last year. I do see them winning some games. And I believe Fernando Mendoza will be the running for the Rookie of the Year. Offensively, let me know what you guys' thoughts about the not the Oakland Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, and what do you think about this schedule here? Let me know in the comment section below, like and subscribe, and let me know who you want to see next.